Welcome to EO Talks, Eastern Oregon's very own talk show, only here on EO Alive.
Hey, Eastern Oregon, thank you for joining us on this version of EO Talks, and it is a pleasure today to have U.S. Representative Cliff Bentz with me here in the studio. Good to see you again, Cliff. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. I'm very, very happy to be here with you.
Good. Well, how are things? And for those of you that might not know Cliff's story in a nutshell, he has been a representative here in Oregon for how many years?
Well, 12 years in the Oregon legislature, now a year and a half in Congress.
Right. And so, like, you've kind of taken the big step, and so the last time we talked, I asked, what's it like to be in Washington, D.C., and how are you adjusting? And I think just a few days after you took office, or you were there, the January 6th.
Right, we were sworn in on the 3rd,
Okay.
and then 3 days later, January 6th, obviously.
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty abrupt initiation.
That's right. Well, cool. Well, thanks for taking the time to stop by here, and really appreciate it. So kind of catch me up on some of the things that are things that you want to brag about. Tell us some of the good things that you feel like you've been able to do and get done.
Well, when you're in the minority, mainly you need to show up at all your committee meetings, and you need to do your best in a position of the loyal opposition to call out the problems with that which the majority is trying to do. And there's been a lot of opportunity to call out problems because much of what the majority, the Democrats, have been trying to do is bad for our country and bad for our state and bad for my district. So I was lucky enough to be put on natural resources, and I was made ranking member of the subcommittee of natural resources, water, oceans, and wildlife. And I've been able to participate as that ranking member in lots of discussions about water and a lot of discussions about oceans and a very few and limited discussions about wildlife. But I was also put on judiciary and had a great opportunity to talk about big tech because I was put on the antitrust subcommittee and the intellectual property subcommittee. And on those two subcommittees, we've had lots of chances to call out some of the crazier things the Democrats are trying to do. And so, and I say that and not to suggest that all the conversations are limited to antitrust and to intellectual property, because of course I'm on the big committee also, and there's any number of issues that have come up in front of that committee. And so I'm very happy to have been able to participate in those kinds of discussions and to make, I think, the Republican and the Eastern Oregon and Southern Oregon and Northeastern Oregon positions clear. And so it's a great opportunity to speak for my part of the state of Oregon.
So let's go back just a minute and talk about water, because water is one of your areas of expertise. Because of that, you were advanced to some committees where you had a voice in that area. Last year we went through a drought. How are things looking for this year?
Well, we are so lucky here in Oregon, particularly in North Oregon, to have received the rain that came in the last couple of months. And some people would say, well, you guys got way too much of it. But I'll tell you, the people in Northern and Central and Southern California, all across the Southwestern United States would frankly give billions for the type of rain that we so fortunately received. So the wheat crop across North Oregon is going to be wonderful. And boy, if ever there was a year when we needed a wheat crop, this is it.
Yeah.
Because of the situation in Ukraine and Russia and other countries. So thank goodness for the water. Mm-hmm. I'll just say that in Central California, the situation is horrid. In Phoenix and Las Vegas and Los Angeles, the situation is worse,
right? Because
there's no water, and so the chances of talking about this, or the reasons to talk about it, are huge. The solutions are limited. We need to be spending far more time in Washington, D.C. talking about these issues, and sadly, very sadly, the Democrats have chosen to ignore many of them.
So, and then one of the other things that last time I talked to you, you had been to the border recently, and you had actually seen, you told us a story about a whole bunch of people that were gathered under an overpass, and they were just didn't really have any place to go. I mean, how is that going? What is your experience of what's happening at the border?
So I've been to the border 3 times, twice in Texas, once down near the very southern tip of Texas, and then in mid-Texas, and then more recently in San Diego along the border. That was about 3 months ago, my last visit. The situation is growing worse by the day.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my communications team and I were talking about how to best describe what's going on. And some people are using the term invasion. That's one word. I think the better word would be tsunami. There's a tsunami of people crashing against our southern border, and hundreds of thousands are being admitted into the United States under our antiquated law of asylum. And so what should be happening is we should be focusing on, excuse me, why it is that we grant asylum to so many people before they've proven that they have a right to it. But the way our law is set up right now is that if you establish that you have a credible fear that of your situation back in your country,
Mm-hmm.
then you're allowed into the United States, and then you await a hearing. And that hearing could take between 3 and 7 years before that hearing happens.
Wow.
So you're in the United States, and that's happening by the hundreds of thousands. I want to say about 240,000 people a month are
Wow.
presenting at the border. And that's just the ones that we know about. There are literally tens of thousands of others that are coming in unannounced. And of course, we saw this horrible situation with all those people in the back of that truck. 40 people, 50 people that
52, I believe.
52 people.
Yeah.
And what's happening is the policies of the Biden administration are welcoming people here, and that's instantly understood by people in other countries, like 80 or 90 other countries, and they're coming into Mexico and swarming up against the border. So we need to do something about it, and I hope, should we Republicans be successful in taking the majority in November, that we will address this issue pretty aggressively.
So what changed? I mean, did Trump have tougher policies, or has this been the same? I mean, the antiquated laws, as you said, they've been that way for a while.
Long time.
And so, so what happened? What has changed between administrations?
Okay, so the Trump administration took an aggressive policy on trying to enforce the laws.
Okay.
And they did so, or it did so, by adequately funding the Border Patrol, by doing its best to build a wall, by doing its best to return to Mexico. It had a return to Mexico policy where instead of allowing you to come into the United States while you awaited your asylum hearing, you were taken back to Mexico and you waited there. And they had cut a deal with the government of Mexico to make that happen. Mm-hmm. And then there was Title 42 was a COVID-related provision that gave authority to the Border Patrol to return people to Mexico if they were not appropriately vaccinated. And those kinds of policies were aggressively pursued by the Trump administration. That was all stopped the day that, and I say all, not all of it, but much of that was stopped the day that President Biden was sworn in, literally on that day. And as a result, people from southern hemisphere began to increase dramatically in numbers, and they were basically advised, the Border Patrol and other folks, to allow folks to come in. And I know this because I've gone down and I've spoken with the Border Patrol people literally for hours, literally for hours. The Border Patrol are wonderful people. They are highly discouraged. Their morale is terrifically low. They don't believe they're getting the support that they absolutely deserve. And of course, the reverberations of all these people coming into the United States are being felt most seriously by the so-called border states.
Right.
But we've said every state's a border state, including Oregon, and that's true because we have literally tens of thousands of people in Oregon now without the benefit of paperwork, is the nicest way to put it.
Yeah. Wow, I can only imagine seeing that, being there, and just, if any compassionate person is going to,
Yes.
You're torn both ways.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
anyone that goes down and sees the people being held in holding rooms and sees them, you instantly feel empathy and sorry for these folks. The challenge truly is figuring out who is deserving of asylum and who is not.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is everybody that can come in and say a few words about why they have, quote, credible fear,
Right.
is then allowed in. And this is, and then the hearing is many years in the future.
Right.
So the odds, A, of those people showing up to their hearings, and B, being held not entitled to asylum, very, very limited.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't want to say this is an easy problem to resolve. It is
Right.
not. But our laws were not set up for mass migration, and that's what we're seeing now.
Right.
Mass migration, hundreds of thousands of people presenting every month.
Right.
And we're not set up to handle it.
Right. And we all just came out of COVID or adapting to it, you know, however you want to look at it. And fear is a very powerful word, and it's very personal. So what I fear, you might not have any concern about whatsoever. But, you know, it's kind of like safety first. Well, if safety really was first in all of our lives, we wouldn't cross the street, because there's always a chance of some fast car coming, you know. And so then mitigating safety and concern and fear, and those things can easily be manipulated if someone has an intention to do that.
You mean credible fear?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, what's been suggested by folks we've spoken to on the border is that different groups who are very enthusiastic about more folks coming into the United States, for whatever reason, some of the very, very best motives of trying to help people out, are advising them online through social media channels, Facebook and otherwise, of what to say. Right. and what kind of story to present. And are these stories made up? Are they not? That's why you're supposed to have a hearing. Well, between 4 and 5 years, 6 years out, I mean, come on.
Right.
Are you going to show up for your hearing? The situation is extremely difficult and deserves much more attention than the Biden administration is giving it.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned social media, let's kind of pivot to that. Sure. So how, I mean, here's a really broad question. How do you think social media has had an impact on the election process? I mean, I know I have some thoughts on that. I know you do, but you've been serving on a committee that evaluates. You'll have to tell me what that committee is, but I mean, just talk to us about that for a minute.
So I'm on the Judiciary Committee, very happy to be there. I'm on the Antitrust Subcommittee of Judiciary, and part of that subcommittee's portfolio, if you will, has been to see whether or not big tech is violating antitrust law. Antitrust law means, is big tech quashing competition? Is it buying up anybody who wants to compete against it? And the answer to that is yes, indeed. Facebook and others are Google, Microsoft, others are buying up those who would compete against them. Yep,
Sure.
Yes, they are. And has that reduced competition? Yes, it has. Have they violated antitrust? Probably. The question is, who's going to bring those actions, and does our system lend itself to actually appropriately addressing antitrust issues? Very, very complex area, not simple at all. But let me shift away from that for a moment and over to the impact that social media has had on our system of governance. And I would recommend that everybody go get a copy of the May issue of Atlantic Magazine and read the article After Babel. Atlantic Magazine May issue, top label title After Babel. It's one of the most interesting articles you will see on the impact of social media on our government process.
Interesting.
And I just want to say one or two things. Many, many people over the years have complained about not having a voice. Well, you do have a voice on social media, no matter how angry, rude, mean you want to be. And if you look at the way that the algorithms that are designed to encourage almost
Right.
Different types of speech, you will find that those algorithms encourage the type of speech most of us would rather not hear. And the type of speech that is angry and outraged, upset, and blaming everybody else for everything.
Right.
remember, you can go on social media anonymously.
Right.
And this allows people who perhaps have little control over whatever they type, and that's a lot of folks,
Right.
to say whatever they want to say about whoever they want to say it and have it seen by all kinds of people. It also allows you to put together groups that share your view, whatever it might be.
Right.
And the more outlandish and outrageous that which you say, the more mileage, if you will, wrong term, you're going to get. What this does is it drives people apart.
Right.
It does not bring them together.
Right.
And so what we have now is a system that promotes being apart. No one wants to talk about, things where gee, these folks got along and everything went well. Oh,
Right.
but does that sell? Does people click on that?
Right.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
And so which stories show up on your cell phone when you open it up first thing in the morning?
Right.
Check to see how many hours a day you're on the cell phone. Most people get a report, some between 4, some 7, some 12, some all the time. And what ends up happening is that more and more and more people are more and more challenged when it comes to trying to get along. That would include Congress, because you're not rewarded for getting along.
Interesting.
You're rewarded for being loud and outrageous, because that reflects the fact that you're fighting
Right.
for whatever it is that you're being loud and outrageous about.
Right.
This does not work well on a system that's designed on compromise.
Right.
And if you go back to how our founding fathers tried to put this whole thing together, they understood that the magic elixir of democracy was compromise,
Right.
was getting along and sorting out our differences in a rational, careful, thoughtful way.
Right.
Social media does not reward thoughtful,
No. And everybody is seeing that in their own family.
of course.
There's so many variety of issues and the age difference in family. My kids are in their 30s and so everybody has different perspectives. And so that's just it's been really challenging. Even in my family, as close as I am, as diligent as I am about communicating and presenting an atmosphere of openness and listening, it's just challenging at times. Yeah.
Yes.
And-
Well, you keep in mind that people who are successful in any type of media now, ask yourself how calm and rational they are.
Right.
They are not.
Right.
And they're not going to sell if they are. And that's been, by the way, true for years, right?
Sure.
Every newspaper, go back to years ago, and the type of things that sold were salacious and angry and outraged.
Right.
But they didn't have the instantaneous viewing of millions,
Right.
which now is available through social media.
Right.
And so the real question is, what are we going to do about it? That's the question.
So what can we do? Is there anything that the government can do about it, or is it just a personal thing that we have to deal with in some manner?
No, I think it's probably both. But I would suggest that we start by understanding what's happening to us.
Right.
And that's why I'm recommending, again, people go get the Atlantic magazine and look at the article on labeled After Babel, the May edition. The reason I keep going to this, I don't agree with everything that's in that gentleman's article,
Right.
but at least it calls out the problem. And
Right.
so recognition of the problem, then we can move forward. Let's have a discussion about it.
Right.
Let's try to figure out what to do so that we're the better for it. There are a number of solutions that the author suggests in that article. Some I agree with, some I don't. But at least he's talking about it.
Right. Well, and social media creates, and I'm sure this is the same concept, these echo chambers. And so then the more people, you have a sense of people agreeing with your outrageous opinion, whatever that might be, because that's part of the algorithm,
Sure.
And then, I posted a year ago, and that is if all of your friends agree with you, you probably need a broader base of friends, because they don't all agree with you. They're not being honest if they all do, So,
Well, remember the magic of business is competition.
Right.
That is competing ideas, not that you agree on everything. The reason for competing ideas in business
Yeah.
is that it drives a better outcome.
Right.
That you're constantly striving for something that makes things better.
Yeah.
And the competition gets you there. Why would you want to be talking with people who agree with you all the time?
Yeah.
How's that going to improve things?
So, I totally get that. In the areas that I lead, my business, and I'm president of a board and so on and so forth, you know, I get a little bit nervous when nobody's coming up against me.
Yes, you may have to, you know who, we'll all know who to blame.
Yeah, that's
but
right, yeah.
The challenge is, how in the world do you prompt people to actually bear down and do the hard work of thinking?
Right.
Which I'm sad to say many times isn't rewarded in this environment.
Right.
Repeating seems to be rewarded. Repeating what you just heard somewhere, you know, somebody else. But at least people should be thinking about that which they are talking about, as opposed to looking for that constant affirmation,
Right.
and a positive, you know, feedback loop sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Try to go out and get challenged, and then don't become so outraged when someone doesn't agree with you.
Right.
Instead, say, well, maybe you've got a point there, and let's talk about it.
Right. So, allow me just a little bit of a personal question, and that is, who comes up against you? Who, you know, I mean, who in your life has the permission or the avenue to say, I really think you need to think about this a little bit more, Dad or Honey, or I mean.
Yeah, I think all the ones you just mentioned.
Okay, yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Well, I'm blessed with a wonderful family. I had 5 younger brothers, one older sister. One of my little brothers was killed in a plane crash some years ago. But my family, incredibly sure that they're all right, and seldom do we agree. So lots of opportunity there for shared differences. How's that? I also am very blessed with a wonderful staff in my congressional office, and they're very aware of the need to call out the mistakes that I make every once in a while. And then, of course, the people I work with in Congress are also, they're very much like my family. They're all
Right.
pretty much sure they're right all the
Right.
time, even when they're not. And so there's lots of opportunity to exchange ideas. And I found many of the groups that I have joined, the caucuses that I have joined, have there's a real opportunity there to share ideas.
Yeah.
And in the most polite way, try to say, well, that's an interesting idea, but,
Right.
and then walk off into trying to get to a better outcome.
Right.
But I have to say, I have a wonderful staff of 19 people roughly that work half in Oregon and half back in D.C. And they're my best sounding board. And
Good.
they're not afraid of saying that's the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard, Congressman. And then we work our way forward.
Good. You said you mentioned the ability to think, and that's one of my banters is that sometimes it seems like we live in such this compartmentalized world. Part of that is social media. Part of it is coming out of COVID, to where it's difficult for people to hold 2 thoughts in their head at the same time. That's the way, you know. So they're not thinking. They don't have the ability to hold on to their convictions, but yet investigate something else. And so then that's just a very narrow path that people find themselves in. How do you deal with that in Congress? I mean, the 2 parties have a fairly distinct, narrow path. This is your 2nd year. How are you dealing with that rigidity? I don't know if it is. I mean,
Oh boy, is it ever.
yeah.
So I would just to call out the challenges that are faced by those of us in Congress, and I think also in the Oregon legislature, I saw this to be the case, and that is that there's no hiding what you're doing. You can't go into a back room and make a deal and then come out and say, there we go, it's all solved.
Right.
Because now everything is instantly known because of social media.
Right.
Everybody's going to know immediately that you made a deal, and they're going to want to know every last aspect of it. Okay, that's fine. But it does not lend itself to resolving really difficult issues.
Right.
Because people camp out on each end of a spectrum, and then they get really angry if
Right.
you move toward the middle.
Right.
And so this makes it very difficult to get anything done with the Democrats. Instead, you have to work within your own caucus and look forward to the day when you have the votes to get something passed. And we've seen this happen over and over and over again, and we're going to see a lot more of it now that the Supreme Court has ruled that many of the issues that the Supreme Court was busy resolving, I think, politically as opposed to legally, now being moved back to the states. And that means the states are going to have to sort out a lot of these really difficult issues that they had punted to the Supreme Court before. And so what does this mean? It means people are going to have to figure out how to reach some sort of solution if our country is going to keep moving forward.
Right.
And our country better, because there's lots of other countries that are very anxious to take our place.
Yeah.
In fact, take what we have. And so figuring out how to bring parties together is going to become the biggest challenge of our future.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult when you have so many that are so anxious to attack anyone who has the audacity to suggest compromise. And so I'll just suggest right now that what I'm looking forward to is the day that I'm in the majority and that I get to argue with my fellow Republicans over what's best. And I believe, I hope, that we'll be able to reach some sort of common ground inside our own caucus and then bring those ideas forward. And I don't want to say it doesn't matter what the Democrats do, but I've noticed that the Democrats don't particularly care what the Republicans say. I don't think that's good. But in the short run, that seems to be kind of the design of how Congress works.
Yeah. So let's pivot to inflation. Let's talk about economics and what's going on. What's going on? Yeah.
Okay, well, pretty complicated.
Yeah.
What's going on is we had a slow growth environment for 10 years where people complained about how slow growth was. And then we had a series of events that sped growth up. And then we had COVID, just when the economy was really starting to click. And I mean, it was clicking.
Right.
And then boom, so it comes to an abrupt stop. And then in order to try to keep there from being a huge, huge economic shock, huge trillions and trillions were dumped into our economy to try to avoid a huge economic wreck. Sadly, that pouring of money into the economy didn't stop quite soon enough. And in fact, I voted against the 1.9 trillion that was passed in March of last year, a year and 4 months ago now. That 1.9 trillion stacked on top of the trillions that had been spent before was gasoline on an already growing inflationary fire. And if you add that to the spurt, it's even much greater than a spurt, huge demand that was evident as we came out of the COVID crisis, then you have the worst of all worlds. You have huge demand, huge piles of money, and a shrinking supply to meet that demand. Too many dollars chasing too few goods means inflation, and that's what we have. And people have blamed it on supply chain difficulties. They've blamed it on all kinds of things. I think it comes down to about three things. First, the supply chain, yeah, that's a problem. Increased demand, a problem. The lack of fuel is a huge, huge problem. The lack of energy, a huge problem that drives up the cost of everything. So too much money, too little attention paid to the need to keep fuel prices down. The war is helping, conspiring, but certainly not the major cause of higher fuel and energy prices. And you put all these things together, you've got terrific inflation. And that's what we have right now. At 8%, 9% inflation, it's a tax on everybody. It's reduced your savings by 8-9%. Wow. Goodbye, yeah. Purchasing power. The worst of all worlds. What should be happening now, by the way, to try to address at least the fuel end of it, would be to be focusing on why we're losing our refinery capacity. Mm-hmm. Because the more fuel we can refine, the lower diesel prices would be. And we're not doing a good job of helping those who refine fuel avoid the stranded asset issue that goes with investing billions in a refinery and then having the Democrats come in and jerk fossil fuel rug out from underneath us. Right. So that's what's happening now, and we could be doing something about it. The Biden administration is not. And that's one. There are so many others. We don't have time to go into them, but we should be doing a far more aggressive job in driving down fuel prices.
So is big oil making a lot of money off of this situation?
Yes.
Okay.
But remember, the solution to higher prices is higher prices. Why? because it drives down demand.
So break that down for me.
The solution to higher prices is higher prices. And most people don't want to hear that.
Okay.
But if we went out and drove down diesel prices tomorrow artificially by half, would
Right.
people use less? No, they would use more.
Okay,
And so as the price of fuel goes up, consumption goes down. Painfully, very, very painfully.
Yeah.
But that's one way of driving down prices. It's also a way, hopefully, of prompting more exploration and more development of fuel and alternatives to fuel.
Yeah.
But I'm not a fan of high fuel prices.
Right.
I'm simply saying that that's a consequence of higher prices. What we should be doing is everything in our power to find more fuel and also different types of fuel. And so I could go off down that
Right.
road if you like, but the trick is if we're going to have lower fuel prices, we need a lot more energy, not less.
Right. Okay. So let's pivot again. You said there's a lot of issues that are going back to the states, and one of those is Roe versus Wade. But you said that some of those decisions you felt were made politically at the Supreme Court.
They were.
And not judicially. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. If you go back to, if you go back to the Roe versus Wade decision in 1973, even the most liberal of our Supreme Court justices admitted that was not based on the Constitution.
Okay.
Everybody knew it, that they had conjured the right of privacy out of, I hate to say thin air, but they had. And everybody knew this. But it took that political decision, it took Congress off the hook, right? Nobody
Right.
had to make a decision,
Right.
the tough decision regarding what to do about unwanted pregnancies. So what ended up happening after these 50 years is finally a conservative court stepped up and said, wait a minute, this is not a political issue. This is a political issue. This is not a legal issue. And we are going to say there's not a right to abortion, if you will, in the Constitution, the United States Constitution. This should go back to the states. And the states now are going to have to sort it out. And many of them have already addressed the issue one way or the other. And then this is the way a democracy is supposed to work. You don't have 9 people sitting there in
Right.
positions of extreme power making these decisions, elected for life. There's no accountability once you're appointed to the court.
Right.
You can do whatever you like. That's not how this is supposed to work.
Right.
And so this particular issue and others are now coming back to the states to be managed. And it doesn't make the issue any easier, but it means that it'll be a more local in determination.
So the Supreme Court shouldn't make law. That's the Congress's.
That's the point.
Yeah, okay.
It's supposed to define it.
Right. So then let's pick a marijuana, legalized in a lot of states, but still against the law federally. And you're not in favor of a federal law, or at least you voted against that one recently. Talk about that. Why shouldn't there be a federal law legalizing marijuana? And I'm not a marijuana component, but when you look at the tide, then you kind of why shouldn't there be a federal law legalizing marijuana?
Okay, right. So well put. The MORES Act, M-O-R-E-S, MORES Act was brought by the Democrats to take marijuana off the prohibited list, if you will, the controlled substance list. And I have said to people, look, in 38 states, marijuana is legal in one way or another at the state level. So for all accounts and purposes, marijuana is, quote, legal, end quote,
Right.
at the state level, certainly. The question becomes, what should the federal government do, given the fact that it's not legal at the federal level? And what I have said is, look, marijuana is already everywhere. The question is, how do we appropriately manage it? Now, we manage alcohol appropriately. We used to
Right.
have all kinds of problems with alcohol. We still do have problems with the consumption of it. But we have taxes in place, a portion of which are used, I would suggest more should be used, in trying to take care of the problems created by alcohol consumption. And there are many. And so, but we have a system in place that raises taxes. And we take a portion of those taxes and we try to address the problems created by alcohol. We are not doing that with marijuana, and we should be.
Okay.
Now, some states have tried, Oregon's for one, but they don't understand that marijuana is easy to produce. It's easy
Right.
to grow.
Right.
And the cartels, foreign cartels, have moved into, I'm going to use Southern Oregon, but many other states. raising hundreds of thousands of pounds of marijuana each year, and then shipping that marijuana to the East Coast, making billions of dollars.
Wow.
This is illegal marijuana.
Wow.
It's not being controlled, it's not being taxed, and the people raising it, for the most part, are illegal folks who've come across the border, usually funded by cartels at $4,000 each, and they don't pay the money, they promise to pay it off, and they work in these marijuana grows to try to pay it back in the worst, most horrid, squalid, awful situations you can imagine. That's happening in our counties here in Oregon. The question becomes, okay, should we try to control marijuana the way we've tried to control alcohol? And the answer is yes.
Okay.
The question is, how are you going to do it?
Right.
If you look at how marijuana is legally produced, you will see that it is taxed enormously. And so that drives the cost of legal marijuana way up.
Right.
How much is illegal marijuana taxed?
Right.
Well, zero.
Right.
And so the question becomes, how do we get control of a market that has been taken over by black marketeers because they have no overhead
Right.
except the guns they buy to threaten the people they have growing the marijuana? And the answer is law enforcement.
Right.
The answer is a lower price for legal marijuana that is controlled and paying appropriate amounts to offset the cost of marijuana when it comes to health care and mental health issues, which are huge,
Right.
and just crime in general. And so that means when we, at the federal level, make a move toward legalizing it, for goodness sakes, let's do it right. Let's make sure that when we legalize it at the federal level, we design a system that puts more of that which is being sold under the control of government, just like we do with alcohol.
Right.
And now you have to start out from the understanding that marijuana is a dangerous drug. And people can say, no, it isn't. The answer, they are wrong.
Right.
And if you look at the damage it does to young men's brains under 26,
Right.
or if you look at the damage it does to people who have a tendency towards psychosis, you know there's a problem. And so the question is, how do we get control of it? And that's what I ask again and again and again as I managed the bill on the floor of the United States Congress just a few months ago, as I voted against the bill, not because I'm saying it shouldn't be legal. It's frankly, it's already here.
Right.
The question is, how do we address this issue correctly?
Right. Needs to be managed.
It needs to be managed.
Right. So, last question, because I got to get you out of here. But this is, so the gun shootings that are going on, the mass shootings, there's just an enormous, and I'm a big gun proponent. I grew up in Wyoming, and I hunt here, and for me, guns they're like tools that are handed down. I mean, I have my father's and my grandfather's guns, but there's an enormous amount of pressure socially from the general population that we need to do something about this. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I don't know. Give me a shot. Give me your thought on where you think this should go.
Well, first of all, our hearts go out to the folks in
Right.
Uvalde, in Chicago, all of the places where folks have suffered as a result of people with mental illness, almost always causing horrible damage. That's first. Second, it should be clear, as you made it clear for yourself, that I am a huge supporter of the Second Amendment and have been my entire life, and I won't be changing positions on my support for the Second Amendment. What we need to understand is that there are, I think, 12 bills that we Republicans have suggested in Congress, none of which received any attention at all on the House side, as the Democrats brought their quote solution in quote forward. I believe that many parts of that which the bill recently got passed are constitutionally suspect, as I put it. And what we should be doing is focusing on the things we know we can fix right now. And I can walk down through each one of the things that they've suggested in those bills and point out that they're not going to help. The real question is, how do we appropriately address those who have mental health issues? How do we appropriately address those who have indicated a propensity toward damage, harm? And we did know, by the way, because of postings on social media, that the young man who killed the people in Chicago was making threats like this for years.
Right.
And we also knew a couple of hours before the gentleman, that's the wrong word for it, the criminal in Uvalde who killed those poor little kids. We need to do a better job of quickly recognizing those kinds of situations. This is a really hard issue,
Right.
and it deserves a whole bunch of attention. And if we don't give it the attention, those of us who support the Second Amendment, we're putting our rights at risk.
Right.
And so I look forward to working further on this issue.
Good. Well, Cliff, thank you always for being here. It's a real pleasure. And you and I've had one time where we didn't have a clock. You were at home in Ontario, and you were in your home office, and I think we had an hour and 15 minutes to talk, and I could always, I just enjoy talking with you. I enjoy your openness, so thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
I'm very, very happy for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Eastern Oregon, for watching this version of EO Talks, and we'll see you next time right here.